She hoped to have seen the last of it, but had awakened to find the tampons soaked. The telephone conversations, first with Dr. Major's nurse, then with the doctor himself, had allayed her fears for progressively shorter and shorter durations. And it was a bother, a gigantic nuisance, and as it was with such things, it had come at a most inopportune time. She thought about Kim Devereaux coming up to spend his spring break from Duke Law School with her in Boston. Her roommate had fortuitously made plans to spend that week skiing at Killington. Everything seemed to have been falling into beautiful, romantic place. Everything except the bleeding. There was no way Nancy could blithely dismiss it. She was a delicately angular and attractive girl with an aristocratic appearance. About her person, she was fastidious. If her hair was the slightest bit dirty, she felt uneasy. So the continued bleeding made her feel messy, unattractive, out of control. Eventually, it began to frighten her. Nancy remembered lying on the couch with her feet up on the arm, reading the editorial page of the Globe while Kim was in the kitchen making drinks. She had become aware of a strange sensation in her vagina. It was different from anything she had ever felt before. It felt as if she was being inflated by a warm, soft mass. There had been absolutely no pain or discomfort. At first, she was perplexed as to the origin of the sensation, but then she felt a warmth on her inner thighs and a tickling trickle of fluid run down into the recess of her buttocks. Without undue anxiety, she recognized that she was bleeding very fast. Casually, without moving her body, she had turned her head toward the kitchen and called out, "Kim, would you do me a favor and call an ambulance?" "What's wrong?" asked Kim, hurrying to her. "I'm bleeding very fast," said Nancy calmly. "But it's nothing to get alarmed about. An extra heavy period, I guess. I just should go to the hospital right away, so please, call the ambulance." The ambulance ride had been uneventful without sirens or drama. She had to wait longer than she thought reasonable in the holding area of the emergency room. Dr. Major had appeared, and for the first time awakened a feeling of gladness in Nancy. She had always detested the routine vaginal exams to which she had submitted, and had associated the face, the bearing, and the smell of Dr. Major with them. But when he appeared in the emergency room, she felt glad to see him, to the point of suppressing tears. The vaginal examination in the emergency room had been, without doubt, the worst she had ever experienced. A flimsy curtain, which was constantly being whisked back and forth, was the sole barrier between the throng in the emergency room and Nancy's flayed self-respect. Blood pressure was taken every few minutes. Blood was drawn. She had to change from her clothes into the hospital gown. And each time something was done, the curtain flashed aside, and Nancy was confronted with an array of faces in white clothes, children with cuts, and old, tired people. And there was the bedpan, sitting right there in the open for everyone to gape at. It contained a large, semi-formed, dark red blood clot. Meanwhile, Dr. Major was down there between her legs, touching her and talking to the nurse about another case. Nancy closed her eyes as tightly as she could and cried silently. But it was all to be over shortly, or so Dr. Major had promised. In great detail, he had told Nancy about the lining of her uterus and how it changes during the normal cycle and what happens when it doesn't change. There was something about the blood vessels and the need for an egg to be released from the ovary. The definitive cure was a dilation and curettage. Nancy had agreed without question and asked that her parents not be notified. She could do that herself after the fact. She was sure her mother would think she had had to have an abortion. Now, as Nancy gazed up at the large overhead operating room light, the only thought that made her the slightest bit happy was the fact that the whole goddamn nightmare was going to be over within the hour, and her life would return to normal. The activity in the operating room was so totally foreign to her that she avoided looking at anyone or anything, save for the light above. "Are you comfortable?" Nancy glanced to the right. Deep brown eyes regarded her from between the synthetic fibers of the surgical hood. Gloria DiMatteo was folding the draw sheet around Nancy's